Stoner Story Witch. Hello and welcome to the Stoner Story Witch podcast. I am your host, Kristyn, and it is so great to have you joining me today. In this episode, we are transitioning into kind of the middle two episodes of this 6-episode season arc. In the first 2 episodes, I dived deeply into secure attachment. In episode 1, I looked into the question, can women earn secure attachment with men in the patriarchy? In what ways does patriarchy actually keep men from being able to experience secure attachment even among themselves? In episode 2, I looked into the contact nutrition and misattunement and moments of attunement. So diving a little bit deeper into the themes of secure attachment, pulling in scenes from the movie. And now in these middle 2 episodes are more of an in-depth character analysis, I guess. Today's episode 3, I'm going to kind of refer to it as the internal family systems of the March sisters. I will also be looking at them kind of archetypally. What do they represent as far as, what thresholds are they standing on? What choices are they making? What are their needs? What is the lesson that they are illustrating for us? What is a big lie that they are grappling with? What's their struggle within the story? The next episode is going to be another character analysis, but it's going to be particularly looking into what I'm calling the wealth wound, where I will again be looking at 4 characters, which is interesting because I'm noticing in episode 1, I looked at 4 men in Joe's life. In episode 3, I'm looking at the 4 sisters. And then in the next episode, I will be looking at 4 people who are in a higher economic status. I'll be looking at Sally, Mr. Lawrence, Teddy, and Aunt March. That episode is going to be a little bit more nuanced in some of the things that I will be discussing, and I will of course be talking about that in that episode. And then at the end of kind of these middle 2 episodes, where I'll be doing the deep dive into the characters, I will then be in the final 2 episodes doing more of relating to themes of liberation, finding cracks in the wall, and relating it to Hadestown. And the final episode of the season is going to be on the process and the larger metaphors that have emerged just through the process of this podcast, because I'm fairly certain I've made clear up until this point, if you've been listening to other episodes, that this podcast is not really about the product, but it's about the process. Time and time again, I keep hearing that. And so if that is the message, then it probably deserves its own episode. So I am saving the final episode of this season is going to be some sort of analysis or acknowledgement of the process of getting this podcast out there, and perhaps related to Little Women, perhaps not at all. Not sure yet. Haven't finished it. Still working on it because I'm still working on the podcast, but stay tuned for that. All right, so now that we've located ourselves within the season, let's dive into episode 3. Each of these sisters can actually represent a part of ourselves. So this episode is my own personal projection of the sisters. It's an invitation to ask myself, how do I react to or interact with each sister in this story as if they were some part of myself? I can look into the choices that they have, the big lies that they encounter, their needs, the thresholds that they're standing on, the struggles that they are grappling with, and just how do I relate to their part of the story? So put differently, this episode is my own personal projection of the sisters. And when we say that, like, oh, somebody is projecting, right? Projection can be a dangerous practice in kind of our interpersonal social relationships. But in this podcast, I believe that there is some liberatory potential in a story to invite us into digging deeper into ourselves through the story and see ourselves reflected back in some way. So in this episode, I'm going to focus on each sister and discuss just my own take as I've kind of meditated on who they are and what they're about, and kind of like dropped into who they are. And I am not an expert on these characters. I have only partially even read the book. This is purely me diving into these characters, putting myself in their shoes, looking at their context, reflecting, like just totally projecting myself all over it. So it is totally valid if your experience of these characters or your take on them is different than what I have. There's maybe like some imposter syndrome that, like, I'm not a literature person, I'm not a therapist. This is, but I'm doing it anyway because this is episode 3 and this is what we do on episode 3. So I hope you enjoy, and let's dive in with Jo. Each sister has also like just their own kind of creative outlet. And so Jo is the writer. And I think it's just really, I think a big theme of Little Women is this theme of connection to some creative self, some creative identity, some, in some cases it's, aspiration towards that end. But for Jo, she is a writer, and like that is such a big part of her identity. She is this aspirational, visionary kind of, she's buckling the system any way she possibly can. I did find this quote from the book when I was just kind of supplementing, or I just felt a curiosity. I haven't even finished the book. I didn't want to do like a total compare and contrast, but I loved this phrase when describing Jo. To be independent and earn the praise of those she loved were the dearest wishes of her heart. So yeah, like she wants independence in a world where like the only way that you can, it seems like the only way that you can really like feasibly survive is by, marrying well, or I guess being like in a rich family, I guess. Aunt March maybe married well, or maybe both. I'm not sure. Was in a rich family and just didn't. I digress. The threshold that I see Jo is standing on is that she's kind of like this, a small fish in a big pond, but also in some ways, maybe it's like a small salmon in a big river that is swimming upstream. And it is this threshold of like the doubt that comes in, which relates to Hadestown, and I will get to that in a later episode. But it's how we lose ourselves when we succumb to what other people say is worthy. And the choice that she kind of has to make in the film is like, does she is this grappling in between, like, do you trust and follow and commune with your own creative muse, or do you proceed with the status quo, right? And so it's, does she pursue writing or does she pursue marriage? It actually is a very similar choice to Amy. I was kind of trying to parse out if there is some sort of like quadrant system among the sisters where like they kind of like each sort of share an access with one of the other sisters. That became kind of fruitless because it just kind of, there's like elements that they're kind of all similar. And anyway, but I was struck by that similarity to Amy of just that there's this creativity as well as the status quo. And there's, this kind of, again, I would project into Hadestown a little bit. this phrase is like the world that we dream about and the one that we live in now. And so she sees that like she's on this lonely road of like she wants so much more, but like the one that she lives in now is, then we kind of see her then struggling, like maybe I should say yes to Laurie if he asks me again. So like, okay, you know what, at my deepest, darkest hour, like, yeah, maybe I will succumb to the status quo. Like I've done all I can towards investing in my creativity. Yeah. Ooh. And what does Jo need? Like, what are her needs? And I would say it's just to be able to live out her queerness, which I will just say is like an independence of the gendered expectations of what it is to be a woman in the world that she's inhabiting, right? She wants to be independent. She wants to just do her own thing. She wants to just kind of and be left alone in that and not be pestered. However, like she also needs, and we see this need being met, like a caring family that will provide for her while she's just in her little creativity cave. And this big lie that she's wrestling with is this, like, nobody cares. I better just stop. I'm not good enough anyway. I better just settle. And a life lesson that she kind of learns along the way, I would say, over the course of the film, is to be yourself, right? Literally, like, sign your name on your work. It was a similar, maybe, crossroads that Meg experienced of kind of pretending to be somebody else, going by a different name. Also, live your life for you and for your beloveds, right? Don't write for anybody but yourself. We see Beth asking her, like, then do it for me. And also, don't marry somebody if you don't love them as you should, which is a life lesson that she also shares with Amy. Like there's some really cool overlaps, but they also are so individuated in their own way, which I think is just a really also compelling theme of this, is how these sisters are kind of all a part of this family, and they're all welcomed to be, again, in naming secure attachment, they get to be seen, safe, secure, and soothed for who they are as individuals and as a part of this like collective family, as one of their mother's daughters, as Laurie likes to say. And Jo's big struggle within the system or within the story is surviving in those patriarchal systems where men define value and therefore erode her confidence. After she loses Beth, she decides to honor her with the stories, honoring her, that her life mattered. And ultimately, and only by doing it for Beth, does she achieve the aspirational mattering and vision that she had originally dreamt of. Again, like, it's similar to Orpheus, who has to actually lose Eurydice in order to finish writing the song and perform it for Hades. I put a pin in it. All right, so like questions to reflect on for our inner Jo is, what journey would I embark on if I weren't afraid of failure? What matters to me, and how would a confident person reach for that? And like, what steps does it take for me to embody that confident person? And I mean, I don't think I've been shy that the podcast is a process more than it's a product. So I really feel deeply the wanting to be true to what you need and what you feel is meaningful and mattering, and not comparing to others, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. And essentially, being told by Mr. Dashwood that, these things don't sell or whatever is sort of like, comparing herself to this like standard of just limited imagination. Now when we move on to Meg is the actor. She helps act out the visioning, the visionary scenes that Joe gets to write. I would say as like kind of an archetype or as a character, she is the sister that is navigating the system as it is. There is, as the oldest, there's also kind of a nostalgia for the good old days, a desire to go back to the memory of when they had more money. She's now on the low end of kind of economic status within her social circle, and that is creating discontent with the past choices that she's made. I would say a threshold, we see a couple of thresholds that Meg is at. We see, again, kind of this theme of individuation. Who is she? Who am I apart from my family of origin? What are my unique gifts and markers of who I am as a person in my own right? She's also very much this end of childhood via marriage. There's a really lovely scene where she and Joe are together before she gets married, and she's like, we knew that childhood had to end one way, and what a lovely way for it to end. And then later we see in the dress shop that there's this recommitting. There's this threshold, which I'll get to in a moment, of recommitting to past choices that we have made, or sitting in the question of, would I choose this again? And yeah, the choices are maybe kind of like the spectrum of that she's operating on is, I would say, it's kind of contentment versus acquiring. It's love versus money. Also just kind of the pitfalls of love in capitalism. It's also secure attachment versus comforts and fashion, I guess, is another way that I put it. So does she have secure enough attachment with herself versus the comforts and fashions when she's going to that, debutante ball and succumbs to this daisy identity? Does she have secure enough attachment with like kind of her own sense of self and in her marriage with John versus, when she's enticed by acquiring the content or acquiring the comfort and the fashion of, that bolt of silk. What Meg needs is remembering that what matters most to her is her family. She says, he has blue eyes and an old soul. So she needs this old soul. She needs, it seems like there's something in this John character, that I also just want to just raise an eyebrow just for a moment about this man who, even in 2024 would feel pretty miraculous, but especially in the 1860s, he has a shaky financial reality to the point where he can't afford his winter coat because his wife bought this silk and it was kind of in between, is she gonna get the silk or so, and he's willing to not just not just cover the cost of the silk that she already paid, but make it up into a dress, forfeiting his coat. But then he's still then able to take a leave from work in order to care for for their collective children, so that his wife can be with her sister during her dying time. I raise my eyebrows at that to just kind of be I love that it's a little it's just a nod at what a man should be. And naming, it makes me curious what his financial situation is, that he can be taking the time off of work. It makes me wonder, was there more money than he was letting on? I don't know. I have some questions about that. And also I appreciate that we're not letting like the reality that like, oh, it's 1860s. A man never would have done this. A man would hardly even do this in 2024. But that we're like not going to be limited by a limited imagination that would say like, well, this is what Meg needs. This is the type of man that it would take for Meg to be like, you know what? Fuck the silk. I'm going to stick to my man because he's in it with me. Fucking love that for her. Way to go, Meg. Good job, John. Yeah, I would say a big lie that Meg has to encounter here is that contentment is a place that you arrive to and not a journey that you choose every single day. Her life lesson, similar to Joe, is like, be yourself. And also what I really like about Meg's trajectory especially is that for me it really illuminates that life has ups and downs. It has peaks and valleys, that life is a tragedy or a romance or a drama or a comedy, and it just depends on the timeline of your story. I just keep thinking of Kurt Vonnegut's talk where he talks about like the arc of stories or the shape of stories, which one of my takeaways of his talk is that it's hubris to be able to stand outside of a story and point to moments in the story and say, this is a good thing that happened and this is bad. He talks about the wisdom of indigenous storytelling, where it's that events just kind of happen. Life just unfolds, and we are too small to be able to really be able to cast any sort of judgment onto good or bad. And also that there is just, I get another take of mine is that a story is just a timeline. It's just a sliver of time and telling a particular season of somebody's life. And that within that little sliver, there can be things that feel good or feel bad or feel joyful or feel sad or whatever spectrum of human emotion. And also, we are too small to be able to judge it as good. That she has made this choice, and Lovers, anybody who kind of knows a little bit about the tarot, I think like would know that like the Lovers is a big, like it's a choice card. Like there's a crossroads and you are choosing between, between two things. She's saying like, I want to work and I want to struggle and I want to do it with John. She says that on her wedding day. And we see that like, life happens, life goes on, dreams shift, reality sets in. Her old desires and wanting for the lost comforts that she had is creating this tension. There's a desire to succumb to social pressure by, I would say, some ill-attuned friends, Sally. But she's confronted with how her choosing John is in a way a cage that is keeping her from this desired social or economic status. And this confrontation with like, okay, wow, like I've made my bed and now I'm going to lay in it. It's giving her this secondary choice. Is she going to recommit to John from this place of wisdom with eyes wide open? Is she going to, or is she not? Is she like, what is she going to do? It doesn't really seem super feasible that like, I don't know, divorce or anything is possible, but like, how does she proceed? Again, it reeks of Hadestown. I see Hadestown everywhere. There's this song in Hadestown. It's called Promises, and it's this recommitment between Orpheus and Eurydice that, she ultimately says like, hey, I don't need any, I don't need the fancy things that I thought I need. I'm going to say more about Hadestown at another time, but I just wanted to make that nod. And yeah, I also think that there's a really interesting just a noteworthy moment for me was at the ball, this like struggle when she tells Lori, like, don't tell Joe. It's the parts of us. She is this struggle. It's to me, Meg is a part of us that actually maybe wants the things that society is selling us, or modernity. In her case, it's marriage and kids. Faced with the parts of us that want something entirely new and different. And this is going to be a Matrix reference. I think about this a lot. It's been so many years since I've seen The Matrix, but I just remember it's the moment in the original Matrix where, is it Cypher? I don't remember his name, but he is sitting there and he's eating steak with Agent Smith, I think. And like he like knows the truth. He like has tasted, liberation, and it is hard. Like it is a hard, lonely path. And he's like, I just want to actually just like taste the steak and just enjoy it and not know that it's just a series of zeros and ones. Like, I just want to be able to enjoy it. And can't I just have this thing? Like, I just miss. And I think that like archetypally, that's a little bit of what Meg is dealing with here too. It's like that she does actually want it. And like, and maybe, is like not quite ready. She was like not quite ready in that moment to like admit to Joe that, she wants the fuss and she wants the feathers and she likes the like the balls and all that. And then it's not until, she's finally ready to grow up and be a woman. And in this case, it means getting married, because archetypally that's like what that is. And then she's able to explain to Joe, like, yeah, no, like this is what I want. Like, just because my dreams are not yours doesn't make them any less important. And just, I don't know, just being compassionate with that. So my questions for reflection for our inner Meg, for my inner Meg, is just reckoning with, like, in what ways have I felt trapped by the choices that I have made? How can I honor what it is that I need moving forward in order to choose it again or to release it and move on to something new? This just feels like, just at this is the month of my 10-year wedding anniversary. And as my partner and I have been discussing, like, there is just, for me, I just want to acknowledge that I'm such a different person than I was when we got married. We've created people that are now a part of our lives. And, it's just, life is so different than it was when we first made this commitment. And it just feels, I kind of feel like, there's this, lovers, marriage, choice. Marriage is just one choice in a series of choices. It could be a job. It could be literally anything. But a revisiting of, like, okay, is this still working? Or like, who am I now? And how have my needs shifted? How have my needs, wants, and desires shifted? And in what ways are they the same? Can I be compassionate to the past versions of me that, maybe didn't know how to ask for these things? Or be compassionate with the fact that, like, Meg does want the nice things. Okay. And Amy is our painter. She also does, like, drawing, but she seems like the visual artist is her thing. I think she does, like, some sculpting and drawing and others, but it seems like very much like the fine arts artist. And Amy, to me, is this aspiration similar to Joe, but mixed with a little bit of, I would say, I guess, like, familial obligation. Perhaps I would say like, I was going to say, like, maybe similar to Meg, maybe similar to Beth. I would say everybody's committed to the family, but that scene that we see with Amy and Aunt March, really plants, for me, it plants the seed in Amy's head that the fate of the family, the financial security of the family. And so that means survival. Like, to be clear, like, it is a matter of life and death. It feels, I am certain. And so there is this, this sense that she's obligated to make it for her family. And if it can't be through this aspiration, then it's kind of this like, well, then I guess I'll just have to marry wealthy. But she doesn't say it. I always knew I would marry wealthy. So put differently, I would say that Amy is creativity confined by capitalism, which I guess you could also say is a challenge of Joe's. Joe is able to break free in a way that Amy is not able to, because Aunt March, in my opinion, has taken hold in a way that Amy remembers. And I mean, whatever, she loves Lori too, I suppose. So the threshold that she is at is this, you actually get the thing you want and you realize you don't want it after all, is kind of what came to me. It reminds me, I just, at the time that I was processing all of this, I also watched The Wonderful Life of Henry Sugar. And I think it's like, yeah, she works so hard. Like, we see that she's like, pursuing this relationship with Fred. He ultimately does propose, and then she's just like, oh my gosh, I guess I can't. Like, it's this thing I thought I wanted, and what she didn't know, or even, I don't think, suspect that Lori was going to ask her. She again is having the choices that she's making is, creativity versus the status quo. Is she going to pursue painting versus marriage? But again, it's just that that she's been tainted by Aunt March, who says, but however, like, you do need to marry rich. What Amy's needs are better choices, right? So to be clear, anytime we are, like, anytime that I'm going to be talking about a woman and her, like, criticizing a choice that she's making, it's like, she just needs fucking better choices. She needs economic possibilities outside of marriage. She needs spaciousness to be able to see what it is that she wants outside of capitalist contexts that are telling her what she should want. And she needs to be chosen. She feels like she's been second fiddle to Joe their entire life. She needs to love and to be loved like Lori. And I think in all the ways that she is so similar to Joe, but has this longingness of companionship similar to Lori in a way that, like, Joe doesn't. I am very much convinced that they are the better match. I know when I first watched Little Women, like the 90s version, I remember I always, like, I wasn't, and I was a kid, but I just, like, wasn't convinced of the Amy Lori, but now I am. I've come around. I've got a more liberated lens of like what this movie's trying to, or what this story's trying to tell. I think, like, for me, a big lie that Amy was confronting is this lie that, like, of like wanting the things that society tells you is worthy of wanting, right? It's this realization, like, wait, I don't actually want this. And the life lesson is, don't marry somebody if you don't love them as you should. I love that. Like, if your heart's not in it, don't do it. And just naming that there is I guess, privilege there too. I also think it's just, well, I think I'll get to this in the next episode too. But just how much they, and I feel this way about Pride and Prejudice also, um, the way that this family really feels like they're on the brink of like this financial ruin. But the movie also makes it very clear that like we see three distinct classes. We see like the Hummels, we see the Marches, and we see the Lawrence family. And so it really is like this tenuousness of like this like shrinking middle class, which, relevant. So yeah, Amy's struggle within the system, within the story, is that she's carrying the financial burden of the family and the emotional burden of the least liberated part of her family, which is Aunt March. Like, it's not a coincidence that she is this companion for, I would just put Aunt March as, I want to be compassionate to Aunt March, but like, she's not operating from from as liberated a place. We don't know that. We don't see her having any creative practice. She has to pay her nieces to hang out with her. Like, she just, and she's not really viewed as like a very friendly person. Anyway, Amy desires to break out of old cycles, but there's this inability to actually do so. She's feeling that she has this talent, but she doesn't have genius, especially when the cards are stacked against her as a woman in a man's world, right? So, questions for reflection on that inner Amy. It's for me, it's, in what ways have I felt, or do I feel that I need to make choices for others versus what is best for me? How does my positionality in overlapping systems of domination and oppression situate me for certain choices over others? What choices might I make if I didn't fear for my safety and belonging and the safety and belonging of my beloveds? Big stuff. All right, and then finally here we have Beth. And Beth's creative outlet is music. She's playing the piano for the family. She's always playing on the piano. And her archetype, I would say, is that she is this archetypal child. She is innocence. She's perfection. She's, Amy even says it to Lori after, I think the first scene we see of them after Beth dies, she's like, she was the best of us. And I know that's like a thing that you kind of say when people die, you want to honor them, and it's this like hierarchy. But no, like, it does seem like there's just always this reverence for Beth as this pure, innocent, childlike, this innocent child that just delights in all the pleasures of the summertime of life. She has her little dolls and her, she also has a really good like moral sense of what is right. Like, she's always doing her chores on time. She's tracking the Hummels even when the rest of the sisters are just like, oh, I'm too busy. The threshold that Beth is here to remind us all is death. And that is her exit from childhood. Like, she did not make it out of childhood alive. She says, like, I never had big dreams. I never had any like hopes, dreams, or visions for anything outside of this family. I kind of like, I'm forgetting if this is in the book or in the movie, but it's like she always suspected she was going to die young, and that it's like her big adventure that she gets to go on right ahead of everybody else. Everybody else gets to leave and go on their adventures, and this is the one that she gets to do. All right, so I want to just take a quick moment here and highlight that, again, this podcast is a process, and part of this process involved me leaving voice memos for myself on my second watch through of the movie. I had my phone ready and I would just stop the movie and I would leave myself a voice note when I wanted to take a moment to feel what was being felt. One thing that I have learned about the brain and emotions is that it takes like 2 minutes to complete a feeling, a wave of emotion. It also can take, I think, about 2 minutes to have a neuroplastic event where that feeling or that whatever is being held in that amount of time can actually allow your brain to change. And so part of my process is wanting to actually allow whatever feelings are emerging to come out, to make some space for them. And so this podcast comes across very mental, very cerebral, and I want to share this clip because I want to remind everyone that a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling went into the creation of what it is I was going to share and why. But I also want to make sure that I'm giving everybody an opportunity to consent to listening to it. I'm doing the best I can in the editing to try to make it not be so jarring in terms of volume, but it was also recorded on my phone. It wasn't a really nice mic, so it might have more mouth sounds, which could just be unappealing. And again, I'm putting it in here as a reminder that a lot of feeling went into this. So I'm crying. It is a 2-minute memo of me crying about big feelings around death. I trust that you can decide for yourself whether that is something that you would like to listen to or not. And you can just stop and not even listen to the rest of this episode, or you can skip ahead. I will have music kind of showing the beginning and the end of that, so you can just skip. It's about 2 minutes, so you can also just kind of fast forward about 2 minutes. But I just want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Again, in terms of secure attachment, what do you need? And get yourself that. And if the idea of listening to me kind of feel through some of these things feels like that would be nourishing and maybe allow you to touch into grief that is kind of hard to touch into, I'm offering that here. And if you're like, you know what, I can't, I revoke my consent to listening to you, then you can just stop or just take a break and come back or whatever feels right. I trust you. And all right, without any further ado, here it is. Beth is really confronting Jo with the fact that she is going to die. It's like a tide going out slowly. Like it's slow, but it can't be stopped. And Jo's saying, I can stop it. I've stopped it before. And oh man, so many feelings in this one because Beth is wanting to be witnessed in the fact that she's at this threshold of her life where she's going to die, and she wants to accept it, and she wants it to be okay, and she wants to know that Jo is going to keep writing the stories of their life. That when she dies, Jo will keep writing stories to show that she mattered, to show that she's remembered. And of course, Jo doesn't want her sister to die. And from the archetypal element, she doesn't want childhood to be over, right? What Beth represents. And, you know, we know that she's stopped it before. Beth has gotten better before. And so she's holding out a hope that she can do it again. And so, yeah, like there's a version of this story that's really happy where we see that
Joe is able to nurse Beth back to health, and that's amazing, and that's great, and we get to celebrate that. And then we also see when it's not enough, when it's time, when her dying time comes. Because if you keep telling the story, all our stories end. And then all that matters is who's left to tell our story. Who cares to read our story?
The choice that I would say Beth represents is like pivotal. It's like to grow up or not, to abandon the illusion of innocence, which like there is no such thing. There's only such thing in systems that are going to threaten us with taking away our safety, dignity, and belonging if we don't obey. But like it is just an illusion. So abandon the need to be perfect, to be good. Beth's need is to be seen and to matter, and I would say disability justice. Like there's no way that I can watch 2024 or in 2024 anytime post-COVID, and I'm seeing this girl that gets sick of scarlet fever. She almost dies, and she's forever disabled. She's forever carrying this disability. She gets sicker more often. She stays sicker for longer, and she never quite recovers. There is this like her health is just in constant decline for like the entirety of the movie, it feels. I mean, it's weird the way the timeline goes in this particular version, but and yeah, like she needs like to transition, to transform. The big lie that Beth is here to illustrate for us is that life is always going to be like this. The lie that we can defy death if we, just throw some money at it, or just do, like whatever, like some like health and wellness regime. I mean, in these days, it seems to be like you gotta like spend your money and take her to the ocean, or take her. That like Joe saved up this money so that she could take her to the ocean. The idea of getting some fresh ocean air. I mean, I fucking love that. I want everybody to be able to go to the ocean to get better. I think it's probably better medicine than a lot of pharmaceuticals. But it's, whatever the prevailing like health and wellness industry of that time was saying, this is what you got to do. And it's like, yeah, no amount of supplements, no amount of exercise or a morning routine or no number of hours of sleep is going to change the fact that like we're going to die. And I fucking just love that there is this death acknowledgement that we are getting practiced in experiencing the fragility of life through Beth. Her life lesson is, I would say there is the memento mori, the idea that, like remembering that we're all going to die, bringing that to the forefront. I talked about that in the last episode with even in things just like in comings and goings, the way that we say goodbye to people as if it could be our last. That like every night we go to sleep is, practice saying good, is the practice death. And then you wake in the next morning and it's like, oh, I made it. One of these days I'm not going to make it, but I'm alive today. And that is cool. I think the importance of ritual mourning and writing as a devotional practice, or writing even as maybe as a coping strategy. I'm going to keep it at devotion, though. I think I meant what I said. She's asking, or creativity as a devotion practice, maybe, because she's asking Jo to write as a way to honor her life. She really wants Jo to just see her, to see that she is dying. She says that the tide goes out slow, but it can't be stopped. And again, I think the struggle within the system in the story is not just, mortality and death. I think it's similar to Meg. The life has peaks and valleys. It has ups and downs, especially the way that this movie was shot and presented. That when you stop telling the story at one point, she has this miraculous recovery and it's a happy ending. But if we carry out the timeline, the ending is tragically predictable. Like, she does die. The thing that they were worried about so much, is she going to die? No, we have to keep her. Like, we can't lose her. We can't lose her. And they ultimately do. And it's just, yeah. So questions for reflection on our inner Beth is to just identify, like, what are the young parts of me that want to claim innocence and perfection that I need to ritually release, to let them die and honor them with a good burial. How do I begin with the end in mind, knowing that my time on earth is finite? What matters most to me? What is worth reaching towards? I think that feels complete. Thank you so much for joining me today as I projected into and reflected on the stories of the March sisters. Thank you again to Carmen Spagnola and all her work on secure attachment and neurobiology, all of her work that you can find on the Numinous Network that I've linked in the show notes. If you have a desire to dive deeper into the themes of the tarot, I also will link two of my teachers, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener and Jessica Lagneto. Highly recommend their work. My next episode is going to be the character dive into the wealth wound with Sally, Teddy, Mr. Lawrence, and Aunt March. And I want to thank Matt Shuby for the podcast art, my husband Kevin Carlo for all his help in the creation of the theme song for the podcast, and Aeneas Mitchell and John Williams for their inspiration of Hedwig's theme and Hadestown. And before I sign off, I would like to leave you with a quote from another one of my teachers, Rev. Angel Kyoto Williams, who says, "Love and justice are not two. Without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change matters."